Welcome, dear listener, to another quiet journey. Tonight, you and I sit together at the edge of forgotten roads. The fire glows softly, shadows stretch long across the desert sand, and the night sky hangs heavy with stars. For a little while, the world outside can wait. Here, you are safe. Here, the burdens of your day may be set down. If these calm journeys bring you peace, I would gently ask you now, before your eyes grow heavy, to like this video and to subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep these stories alive, like caravan fires glowing across the dark horizon. And I would love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Perhaps in a quiet bedroom, the lights low. Perhaps in a restless city that has not yet fallen silent. Or perhaps under the open sky, where the night itself is your companion. Share it if you wish, so others may know they are not alone in these sleepless hours. The night is here. And the Silk Road waits. Not the road of textbooks, not only the maps of empires, but the unseen path. A trail of whispers, of forgotten hands, of secret exchanges. A road that carried not only silk and spice, but ideas, prayers, fears, and hopes. Close your eyes, and imagine the sound of slow footsteps in sand. The soft chime of camel bells swaying in rhythm. The creak of leather, the murmur of voices speaking in a dozen tongues. Ahead, the horizon glows faintly where the fires of a caravanserai wait. The air is cool, the desert wide, the stars endless. You may feel your shoulders ease as you step onto this path. Let your breath grow steady. Let your thoughts soften, wandering like caravans drifting across the night. For tonight, you travel not as a trader burdened with goods, not as a diplomat heavy with treaties, but as a dreamer, unhurried, safe, carried gently along the unseen narratives of the Silk Road. And now, as your eyes grow heavy, as your mind drifts, as your breath falls into rhythm with the bells of the caravan, we begin. The Silk Road. A name that glimmers like fabric in candlelight. But the road itself was never only silk. Never only the glitter of goods or the coins exchanged at dusty tables. It was a living path, a breathing artery of humanity. And its stories, so many of them unseen, unrecorded, drift like whispers through time. Close your eyes and imagine those paths at their beginning. Not one straight road, but 1,000 threads weaving through deserts, mountains, valleys, and steppes. Some well worn by endless caravans, others barely visible, faint traces in sand or snow. The Silk Road was not a single ribbon across the world. It was a vast web, stretching wider than empires, binding cultures that had never before touched hands. Merchants told their tales in market squares, but behind them were stories far older. Of rivers carved into stone, of oases blooming like miracles in wastelands, of mountain passes so narrow that only one traveler could move at a time. The road was carved not only by ambition, but by survival, by memory, by the need to cross. And the people who walked it carried more than goods. They carried songs, prayers, remedies, fears. They carried the touch of one language upon another, the image of one god beside another, the taste of one fruit mixed with another spice. Every step was an exchange, whether or not coins changed hands. What truly drove these journeys? Was it profit? Was it curiosity? Was it hunger? Or was it something softer, something less spoken? The desire to connect, to share, to leave one's own narrow world behind and glimpse the horizon of another. Caravans moved slowly, but the ideas they carried moved faster. A new recipe for medicine might reach a distant kingdom sooner than the caravan itself. A rumor of a strange invention could travel from mouth to mouth until it outpaced the very traders who carried it. The road was alive, invisible even as it left visible traces in sand and stone. And so the Silk Road became more than a trade route. It became a mirror of humanity's longing. Longing for wealth, yes, but also for knowledge, for connection, for meaning. The unseen narratives of those who walked it were not written in scrolls, nor carved in monuments. They were written in breath, in footsteps, in smoke drifting from fires shared between strangers. As you listen now, let your thoughts wander along those paths. Winding, endless, fragile. Feel the quiet mystery of a world bound together by invisible threads. The whispers of journeys too vast to measure, too deep to ever fully know. And so the story begins, not with silk, not with spice, but with whispers. Forgotten paths, carried forward by those who dared to walk into the unknown. To follow the Silk Road was to surrender yourself to the immensity of the earth. This was not a neat ribbon of stone laid down by one empire, not a single road stretching from east to west. It was a web, a living braid of paths woven across continents, shifting with seasons, storms, and the rise and fall of kingdoms. Sometimes it was wide and bustling, alive with 1,000 travelers. Sometimes it was no more than a faint trail, half buried in sand, remembered only by those who knew how to listen to the land. First, the deserts. The Taklamakan, the Gobi. Oceans of sand where the horizon wavered like heat itself, where days stretched on in a silence that seemed eternal. The wind erased footsteps as quickly as they were made, reminding travelers how fragile their presence was. A caravan might march for days without finding shade, each breath dry, each drop of water guarded like treasure. At night the cold came swiftly, frost biting into the very sand, stars burning with an icy brilliance overhead. The desert was not empty. It was vast, alive with whispers of wind and echoes of ancient bones. To cross it was to confront both nature and oneself. Then the steppes. Wide grasslands rolling endlessly under the sky. A sea of green and gold that shifted with the seasons. Horses thundered across it, guided by nomads whose lives were bound to the horizon. Here the road was not marked by stone, but by memory. Invisible lines traced in the mind of the rider, passed down through generations. One could ride for days and see no walls, no towers, only sky above and earth below. And yet the nomads never lost their way. For them, The land itself was a map. Beyond lay the mountains. The Pamas, the Tian Shan, the Himalayas. Jagged teeth of the earth, their peaks white with snow that never melted. Here caravans slowed. Each step was a negotiation with the mountain itself. Paths narrowed to ledges no wider than a man's stride. Cold cut through furs and cloth, breath grew thin in the high air. Avalanches could swallow whole groups in silence. Storms could close the way for weeks. Yet still, traders climbed, because beyond each ridge lay another world, another people, another market waiting. Rivers too shaped the road. Silver threads cutting through valleys, carrying not only water but life. Villages bloomed along their banks, orchards flowered, fields ripened. Caravans paused to refill skins, to rest, to barter with villagers for fruit, grain, and news. In deserts, wells and oases became sacred. Their waters sweet as salvation. To drink from the same well as a stranger was to share more than water. It was to share trust, survival, a moment of kinship born of necessity. And always, above it all, the sky. In deserts it stretched endless and merciless, a dome of light by day and of infinite stars by night. In the steppes it rolled like a vast ocean, blue as far as the eye could wander. In the mountains it pressed close, sharp, crystalline, as though one could reach and touch the cold edge of heaven. For caravans, the sky was compass and calendar, guiding them by constellations, warning them with storms. It was a constant, vast companion, indifferent, eternal, and yet comforting in its permanence. To travel the Silk Road was to move through extremes. Burning heat that made every breath an effort. Cold so sharp it cut through bone. Winds that howled with sand and dust, blinding all sight. Rains that turned roads into rivers, floods that washed away bridges and villages alike. It was not one geography, but all geographies stitched together. A road of contrasts, of hardship, of beauty. And yet, despite all of this, caravans moved. Endlessly, year after year, century after century. They moved because they must. Because beyond the desert, beyond the mountains, beyond the steppes, lay not only wealth but connection. Other people, other stories, other worlds waiting to be touched. Now, as you rest, imagine lying at the edge of such a road. A caravan has set its camp nearby. A fire flickers against the dark, sparks drifting upward like the stars above. The air smells faintly of smoke and roasted grain, mixed with the cool breath of night. The earth beneath you is steady, the sky above infinite. And between them, you feel small, but safe. Held gently within the vastness of the world. This was the geography of the Silk Road. Harsh, endless, breathtaking. A land that tested, a land that taught. And through it, humanity carried not only goods, but dreams. Weaving its unseen narratives across the very skin of the earth. When we think of the Silk Road, we imagine treasures glittering in markets. Bolts of silk gleaming in sunlight, spices spilling in colors of fire, jewels glinting in carved boxes. But the road itself was not built by kings, nor carried by merchants alone. It was carried on the backs, the hands, the breath of people whose names were never written. The unseen architects of ancient trade. Imagine the camel drivers. Their faces weathered by sun, their voices low as they coaxed their beasts forward through wind and sand. They did not own the silks, the spices, the porcelain they carried. Yet without them, the road would fall silent. For it was their strength, their patience, their endless steps across deserts and mountains that bound worlds together. Their days began before dawn. The stars still visible, the air cold against their skin. With quiet murmurs and soft bells, the camels rose, heavy with burdens, bolts of silk, jars of oil, baskets of fruit dried for the journey. The drivers walked beside them, staff in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. They knew the hidden wells, the dangerous ravines, the signs of shifting weather. They knew the whispers of the land itself. There were also the translators. Men and women who spoke not only languages, but cultures. A merchant might carry gold, but a translator carried meaning. Without them, a bargain could sour, an alliance could fail, a simple word could spark insult. These voices, often forgotten in history, were the bridges upon which diplomacy walked. And the artisans. The ones who prepared the goods, who packed fragile porcelain in straw, who sealed jars of oil with wax, who stitched carpets tight so they would survive the journey. Their skill meant survival. For if a jar shattered in the desert, its contents were lost forever. If a bolt of silk was damaged by rain, it might never sell. Their unseen care kept empires connected. Then there were the guides. Men who knew where rivers carved hidden paths through the mountains, who knew which stars to follow in the desert sky. They were not rulers, yet their knowledge ruled life and death. A caravan without a guide was like a ship without sails. And at every stop, there were the innkeepers, the caravanserai keepers, the ones who lit fires, cooked meals, guarded walls. They welcomed strangers with bread, water, sometimes with song. Their courtyards were places where Persians sat beside Indians, Arabs beside Chinese, where stories and news traveled faster than any caravan. But life was not easy for these unseen workers. The camel driver's back ached, the translator carried the burden of suspicion, the artisans lived with the fear of loss. Many never saw the wealth they carried. They earned coins, food, perhaps safety, but rarely glory. And yet without them, the Silk Road would have been impossible. Close your eyes and imagine standing at the edge of a caravan. The merchants are asleep, dreaming of profit. The noble envoys are resting in tents, guarded and honored. And around the fire, the drivers sit quietly. Hands rough, eyes tired, voices murmuring in low tones. They are the pulse of the road. Their footsteps the heartbeat of history. Unseen, but enduring. The Silk Road is remembered for its riches. But it was built, always, by the invisible hands of ordinary people. Those who walked when others rested. Those who worked when others ruled. those who carried the weight of history upon their backs, without ever claiming it as their own. And so, in the unseen architects of the Silk Road, we find its truest story. Not only the brilliance of empires, but the quiet resilience of those who made connection possible. Along the Silk Road, the journey was endless. Days stretching into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. The road was harsh, relentless, a ribbon of dust and stone winding through deserts, mountains, and steppes. And yet, scattered along its vast expanse, there were havens. Small islands of safety where weary travelers could rest, where strangers became neighbors for a night, where the unseen web of trust was woven in firelight. These were the caravanserai. The word itself drifts softly. Caravan. The moving body of people and beasts. Sarai. The house, the shelter, the resting place. Together, they form something more than a building. They form a promise. Imagine approaching one after a long march through the desert. The sun has burned all day, the air dry, the sand clinging to clothes and lips. The camels groan under their loads, their bells clinking weakly. The horizon seems endless, flat and merciless. Then, faintly, a shape appears against the horizon. Low walls, square towers, a gate carved in stone. The caravanserai. As you draw closer, life stirs. Smoke rises from fires within the walls, voices murmur, children laugh, dogs bark. And when the great doors open, a world unfolds. Inside, a wide courtyard stretches before you. Stone walls enclose it, strong and high, meant to keep out raiders and wind alike. Stables line the edges, their shadows cool, their floors soft with straw. Camels kneel and sigh as their burdens are lifted. Horses drink deeply from stone troughs. The air fills with the mingling scents of grain, of hay, of sweat, of smoke, of spice. Merchants gather in corners, spreading their wares across blankets. Bolts of silk, jars of oil, sacks of cinnamon, carved ivory figurines. They trade not only with the locals, but with one another. A Persian trader bargains with a Chinese silk merchant. An Arab spice dealer laughs with an Indian jeweler. A Turkic horseman drinks tea beside a Buddhist monk. The courtyard becomes a living map of the world, drawn not in ink but in faces, in voices, in fragrance. And there are always the stories. At night, when the fires glow and the stars stretch wide above, the caravanserai becomes a hall of memory. Travelers sit together, drinking from shared bowls, tearing bread into pieces, dipping it into stews flavored with whatever spice the road provided. They tell stories of distant lands, of emperors and wars, of strange inventions, of miracles and monsters. Some tales are true, some are only shadows of truth, but all are believed in the moment. For what else is there to bind strangers but the stories they share? The keepers of the caravanserai move quietly among them. Men and women who tend the fires, prepare meals, sweep the courtyards, guard the gates. They are hosts, protectors, witnesses. They do not travel the road, yet through their walls the world passes by. They hear the whispers of 100 languages, the news of wars fought thousands of miles away, the rumors of discoveries yet unseen. The caravanserai is a marketplace, a fortress, a stage of diplomacy, and a home, all at once. But beyond trade and talk, these places were sanctuaries. Safe walls in a dangerous world. A caravanserai meant protection from bandits who prowled the roads, from storms that swept across deserts, from wolves that stalked the night. It was not just shelter. It was survival. And yet, more than survival, it was belonging. For one night, or two, or three, a caravanserai turned strangers into companions. A Greek merchant could share a meal with a Persian nomad. A Mongol horseman could sit beside an Indian scholar. A Chinese monk could listen to the songs of Arab sailors. In these courtyards, the divisions of empire blurred. Each person equal beneath the stars, each person warmed by the same fire, softened by the same smoke of burning wood. The Silk Road is often remembered as a corridor of wealth, of goods carried endlessly across the earth. But in truth, it was the caravanserai that gave it life. Without these waypoints, no caravan could last, no alliance could be made, no road could truly bind east and west. They were the invisible spine of the route, the heartbeat that kept it alive. Close your eyes now. Picture yourself within one of these walls. You hear the murmurs of voices in languages you cannot name. You smell spices unfamiliar, rich and strange. You feel the warmth of a fire at your side, the cool stone at your back. Outside, the desert wind howls, but within these walls, there is peace. The stars shimmer above the courtyard, and for this night, the world is one place. The caravanserai was never only a building. It was a bridge. Between lands, between tongues, between strangers. And its memory lingers still, though its stones are silent, though its gates are broken. For in every quiet rest, in every shared meal, in every fire that warms strangers side by side, the spirit of the caravanserai lives on. On the Silk Road, wealth shimmered in silk and gold, but life itself shimmered in water. For in the deserts and steppes, water was the true treasure, rarer than pearls, more sacred than gems. The caravans that wound across the sands could survive without silk, could travel without spice, but not without water. It was the unseen diplomat, the invisible law that governed the road. Imagine the caravan pressing forward beneath the sun. The horizon bends with heat, the air quivers, every step heavy with thirst. The lips of men crack, the beasts stumble, the air feels like fire drawn into the lungs. The sand glitters as though it were made of endless mirrors, reflecting light until the eyes blur and sting. And then, in the far distance, a ripple of green appears. A cluster of palms, a glint of blue, the shimmer of salvation. An oasis. Oases were miracles of the Silk Road. Pockets of life carved into emptiness. Springs bubbled up from hidden veins deep in the earth, creating pools where birds gathered, where reeds swayed, where shade fell thick and cool. Around these waters, villages grew, markets flourished, and treaties were signed. for whoever controlled the oasis controlled the road. Water was power. A king could demand tribute not by holding armies, but by holding wells. A tribe could turn the tide of trade by opening their springs to one caravan and denying another. Many wars of the desert were not fought over land, but over water, over who could drink and who must thirst. But water was also generosity. In the caravanserai, bowls of water were set out for guests before food was offered, hands washed before bread was broken. To give water was to give life, to declare peace. It was the first and simplest act of diplomacy. Picture the moment when strangers meet at a well. Their clothes different, their languages unknown to one another. Yet both bend, cup their hands, and drink from the same pool. In that moment, they are no longer enemies, no longer strangers. They are two humans, bound by thirst, saved by the same source. Trust begins not in words, but in the shared act of survival. And water itself carried stories. From the Tarim Basin to Samarkand, from Kasha to Bukhara, the flow of rivers and the shimmer of wells determined where roads bent, where cities rose, where lives converged. Wells were marked by carved stones, their edges worn smooth by countless hands. Springs were blessed with offerings, prayers whispered to the spirits that guarded them. Even the animals knew the sacred rhythm. Camels groaned with relief, horses stamped and drank deeply, their breath cooling at last. At night, beside an oasis, caravans found more than water. They found community. The pool reflected stars, fires flickered in the distance, and voices mingled in song, in bargaining, in prayer. The air smelled of damp earth, of reeds, of cooling wind. For a few hours, the desert was no longer harsh, but kind. Without water, the Silk Road would have been impossible. Every journey, every alliance, every empire it touched was dependent upon wells, rivers, oases. They were the lifelines of the unseen world. The threads that stitched the road together, invisible until thirst made them shine like jewels. So tonight, as you breathe slowly, imagine the gift of water after a long road. The first sip, cool against your lips, soothing against the dryness of your throat. The way it spreads through your body, steadying, calming, reminding you that you are safe. The desert outside may be endless, but here, beside the well, there is peace. The Silk Road's unseen narratives were written in many languages. But the oldest, the truest, was water. The shared cup, the flowing stream, the eternal oasis. Whispering across centuries, life is fragile, but it can be shared. The Silk Road was never an easy passage. It was a thread stretched across wilderness and empire, fragile, vulnerable, always at risk. Caravans carried treasures that gleamed in firelight, spices that perfumed the air, silks that shone like captured sunlight. And wherever there was treasure, there were eyes watching. Guardians and bandits alike, shadows moving across the road. Imagine the caravan at night. A circle of fires flickering in the desert, the camels kneeling in the sand, their burdens stacked close for safety. Drivers sit near the flames, whispering in tired voices. and beyond the glow, unseen in the darkness, figures move. Some are there to protect. Some are there to pray. The guardians were many. Soldiers hired by merchants, tribes paid in tribute, rulers who stationed patrols along dangerous stretches. Their presence was reassurance. Steel at the caravan's side, eyes scanning the horizon for ambush. They were not only fighters, but symbols. Their spears told others, "This caravan is watched, this road is claimed, tread carefully." But the road was wide, and the shadows deep. Bandits were always there, hidden in ravines, lurking in dunes, waiting in mountain passes. They knew the roads better than maps. They knew when caravans were weakest, when the animals grew tired, when water ran low, when guards were distracted. A sudden rush, a storm of dust, and wealth could vanish into the night. And yet, between guardian and bandit, there was no fixed line. Sometimes the tribe that demanded tribute one year offered protection the next. Sometimes the soldier who swore loyalty at dawn betrayed his masters at dusk. Sometimes a bandit became a guide, trading his knife for a wage, his ambush for allegiance. The Silk Road was not black and white. It was survival, negotiation, shifting loyalties. There were also the silent watchers. Villagers who lived near the road, shepherds in the hills, wanderers who drifted with the seasons. They saw the caravans pass, they saw who prospered, who struggled, who fell. Some offered help, bread, water, guidance. Others carried news, whispers of danger, rumors of riches. And some waited patiently, ready to take what fortune left unguarded. Rulers understood the delicate balance. To keep the road alive, they needed to make it safe. Persian kings built patrol stations, Chinese emperors raised watchtowers, Central Asian Khans struck deals with nomadic tribes. A safe road meant wealth for all, for if caravans ceased, markets fell silent, cities grew poor, thrones trembled. And so, protection became diplomacy. To guard the road was to claim its lifeblood. Still, no wall, no army, no treaty could erase the fear entirely. The Silk Road was a road of risk. Every trader who stepped upon it accepted that danger would travel with him. Yet they went anyway, trusting that watchful eyes, whether soldiers or strangers, would see them through. Close your eyes now. Picture yourself standing at the edge of the fire's glow. Behind you, the caravan rests, the camels sigh, the merchants dream. Ahead of you, the desert is wide, the horizon dark. In the distance, you sense eyes upon you. Perhaps friend, perhaps foe. And yet the fire is warm, the night is still, and for this moment, you are safe. The Silk Road was shaped not only by merchants and kings, but by those who watched its shadows. Guardians and bandits, protectors and predators. Their presence gave the road its tension, its uncertainty, its edge. And though their names are lost, their footsteps remain, echoing in the silence of the land. Reminding us that every journey depends not only on those who walk beside us, but on those who watch from afar. The Silk Road is remembered for treasures. bolts of silk shimmering in candlelight, sacks of spice that perfumed whole markets, jewels glinting in carved chests. But the most precious cargo it carried was not always seen, not always weighed, not always bought or sold. It was knowledge. Whispers of ideas, discoveries, and wisdom, passed from one mind to another like sparks leaping from fire to fire. Imagine a caravan stopping at a caravanserai after weeks of travel. The courtyard glows with firelight, merchants trade their wares, guards rest against the walls. And in the corner, two travelers sit together, one from the east, one from the west. They share a meal, they share a drink, and then, quietly, they share ideas. A new way to heal wounds. A new way to measure the stars. A story from scripture, a verse from poetry. These were not entered in ledgers, but they shaped the world more deeply than any spice or gem. From India, knowledge of medicine traveled west. Herbs to ease fevers, techniques of surgery, the wisdom of Ayurveda. In return, Greek physicians carried their own teachings eastward, sharing the words of Hippocrates, Galen, and their students. A healer in Samarkand might know remedies born in Athens, blended with herbs from Kashmir. The body of one patient became the meeting place of worlds. From China came paper. Fragile sheets that would change the very way humans remembered. No longer would knowledge be locked in clay tablets or carved in stone. Paper made thought light, portable, enduring. It passed through Central Asia, reached Baghdad, then Cairo, then Cordoba. From there, it flowed into Europe, carrying with it philosophy, poetry, mathematics, faith. All because caravans carried not only goods but the very tools of memory. Astronomy, too, traveled the road. Charts of the stars, observations of the heavens. The constellations above the deserts were not the property of one people. They were maps shared by all. From China to Persia to Arabia, scholars compared notes, refined instruments, shared methods. The astrolabe that guided sailors in the Mediterranean bore the imprint of ideas exchanged across mountains and sands. And art. The way a brush curved, the way a pot was glazed, the way a pattern unfurled across fabric. These too were gifts of the road. Chinese porcelain inspired Persian potters. Persian carpets influenced Italian weavers. Buddhist iconography from India traveled into the caves of Dunhuang, painted alongside stories brought from distant lands. To walk into a temple or a mosque, a church or a palace, was to see the fingerprints of the Silk Road upon the walls. Even philosophies and beliefs were exchanged like quiet gifts. The questions of Greek thinkers mingled with the meditations of Indian sages, the discipline of Confucian scholars, the mysticism of Sufi poets. Each encountered the other, argued, adapted, transformed. The Silk Road was not a one-way street of goods. It was a two-way, many-way, endless street of ideas. Consider this: a trader sets out with silk, expecting only to return with gold. Yet along the way, he learns a prayer in a language not his own. He carries it home, whispers it to his family, and it takes root in their lives. No profit was made, yet something priceless was carried across the world. This was the true wealth of the Silk Road. Not the silks, not the spices, not the treasures that kings hoarded and wars consumed, but the unseen, uncountable treasures of thought, of art, of faith, of science. Treasures that shaped civilizations, that still shape us now. Close your eyes. Imagine sitting at one of those fires, the air rich with spice, the stars burning above. Around you are voices in languages you do not understand, but in their laughter, in their gestures, in their songs, you feel the connection. Knowledge passes invisibly, like fragrance, like smoke. It drifts, it lingers, it changes the world without ever being weighed or measured. The Silk Road's greatest cargo was the unseen. The ideas and innovations that still whisper to us across time, reminding us that humanity's deepest trade has always been not in things, but in wisdom. Not every story of the Silk Road was spoken. Not every exchange was carried in words. Sometimes, the most profound messages were silent, woven into objects that passed from hand to hand. Instruments, manuscripts, fabrics, carvings. Each one a language without a tongue, yet understood by all who touched them. Imagine a lute, its wood carved in Persia, its strings drawn tight with care. A musician carries it eastward, and when he plays in a distant market, the sound is strange, unfamiliar. Yet slowly, the notes become familiar to those who listen. A local artisan studies its shape, its resonance, and in time he builds his own. A new instrument is born, not identical, but kin. And so music itself traveled the road, one note at a time, carried not by speech, but by sound. Manuscripts too crossed deserts, tucked safely into leather satchels, wrapped in cloth against the dust. A single page of poetry in Persian might inspire an artist in Samarkand to weave new patterns into silk. A Buddhist sutra copied in India might be read in a temple in Dunhuang, its words illuminating painted caves. And sometimes, a manuscript traveled even farther than the language it carried. Unreadable to its owner, yet still treasured as an object of mystery, beauty, and faith. Then there were the textiles. Carpets woven in Anatolia, their knots tight, their dyes drawn from madder root and indigo, traveled east to China. Silk robes stitched in Chang'an, embroidered with golden dragons, made their way westward to the courts of Baghdad or Venice. These garments were not only clothing. They were identity made tangible. To wear a robe from another land was to declare a connection, a bond, an openness to the world. Even small things spoke loudly. A coin stamped with the face of a distant ruler. A glass bead glowing with unfamiliar color. A ceramic bowl whose glaze shimmered in hues unknown to the local potter. These objects were teachers. Silent ambassadors that carried lessons in technique, in style, in meaning. Think of the way designs spread. A lotus painted on a Chinese bowl. A motif born in India, carried across the road, reinterpreted by new hands. It appears again on Persian carpets, then on Italian frescoes. Each time changed, each time renewed. The object spoke without voice, its message woven into form and color. And beyond beauty, there was practicality. A new type of stirrup, a different design for saddles, a tool for measuring stars. These two traveled the road, unspoken but essential, shaping the way armies fought, the way merchants navigated, the way farmers harvested. Silent innovations that transformed lives far more than silk or spice ever could. The language of objects was durable. Words might be forgotten, accents might shift, but a bowl remained, a fabric endured, a carving spoke across centuries. Even now, in museums and ruins, these objects still whisper. They tell us of hands that shaped them, of journeys they survived, of the unseen bridges they built. Close your eyes. Imagine holding such an object. A fragment of cloth, worn and faded, yet still carrying the trace of a pattern stitched centuries ago. The fingers of some forgotten artisan worked these threads, their breath once warm upon this fabric. Now it rests in your hand. Silent, but speaking. Reminding you that across all distance, across all time, we are bound by the things we leave behind. The Silk Road was not only a highway of wealth, but a library without walls. A gallery without borders. A conversation carried in ceramics, in carpets, in coins, in songs. And though the voices are long silent, the objects still speak, telling their stories in the only language that never needs translation. The language of form, of touch, of beauty. The Silk Road carried more than silk. More than spices, jewels, or porcelain. It carried belief. Invisible, powerful, enduring. Faiths that shaped empires, prayers that echoed across deserts, stories of gods and prophets that moved not in armies, but in caravans, in whispers, in footsteps. Imagine a caravan winding through the mountains of Central Asia. Among the traders and guards walks a monk in saffron robes. He carries no treasure but scrolls, his belongings light, his eyes steady. He pauses at a village and speaks of the Buddha's path. He shows a painted image, soft colors of lotus and wheel. The villagers listen, some curious, some unmoved. But one child remembers, carries the image in her mind, repeats it years later to another. And thus faith travels. Slowly, gently, not always noticed, but enduring. Buddhism spread eastward this way. Carried from India into China, into Korea, into Japan. Not in armies, not in decrees, but in caravans and pilgrimages. Monks traveled on foot for months, even years, their paths guided by the hospitality of strangers, by the safety of caravanserai, by the kindness of those who gave bread and water. They carried sutras copied on fragile paper, statues carved from wood, beads strung together as memory. And in return, they brought new ways of seeing, compassion, meditation, the search for release from suffering. In the same way, Islam traveled outward, west to east, carried not only by conquest but by trade. A merchant from Arabia arrived in Samarkand, his wares heavy with cloth and spices. Yet he carried more than goods. He carried prayers whispered 5 times a day, verses recited in the dark, stories of the Prophet's kindness. Local families who traded with him learned his words, saw his rituals, tasted his hospitality. And slowly, Islam took root, spreading through markets, through marriages, through friendships built along the road. Christianity too touched the Silk Road. Nestorian monks carried crosses eastward, planting them in villages deep in Central Asia, even reaching as far as China. Their scriptures translated, their faith mingled with local traditions. They brought images of Christ painted in foreign styles, songs that blended with local melodies. Though they never spread as widely as other faiths, their presence left marks that can still be traced in stones, in manuscripts, in forgotten chapels. Zoroastrianism, ancient and flame-centered, burned brightly along the Persian stretches of the road. Fire temples rose in desert towns, their flames eternal, watched by priests who whispered prayers of balance and truth. Caravans passing by often paused to honor the fire, even if they did not share the faith. For the sacred flame was seen as a universal symbol. Light against darkness, warmth against cold. Judaism too traveled with merchants, carried in scrolls and memory. Jewish traders established communities in caravan towns, synagogues rising beside mosques and temples. Their prayers in Hebrew echoed alongside chants in Sanskrit, Arabic, and Chinese. In these towns, no single faith reigned alone. The Silk Road was a mosaic, a meeting ground where belief was traded as surely as silk. Faiths did not always pass in peace. Sometimes they clashed, sometimes they competed, sometimes one was pushed aside by another. Yet even in conflict, they influenced each other. A mosque's dome inspired by a Buddhist stupa. A Christian hymn echoing the rhythm of Persian song. A Persian poet weaving imagery from many traditions into a single verse. The Silk Road blurred the edges of faith, reminding humanity that belief is not only boundary, but bridge. Picture a caravanserai at dusk. Merchants setting their wares aside, guards laying down spears, cooks stirring fires. And in one corner, a monk murmurs his chants. Nearby, a Muslim trader bows in prayer. Across the courtyard, a Jew whispers blessings over bread. A Persian lights a small flame in honor of fire. Different voices, different gods, but the same stars above, the same desert surrounding, the same air breathed by all. Faith traveled the Silk Road not as conquest alone, but as comfort. It gave travelers courage to face the desert, strength to climb mountains, hope to endure the unknown. To carry faith was to carry home within oneself. And to share it was to share more than goods, it was to share meaning, purpose, the invisible map of the spirit. Even now, the ruins of Silk Road cities whisper of this mingling. Temples beside mosques, stupas beside churches, shrines carved with symbols layered one upon another. Proof that the road did not belong to one faith, but to many. Proof that humanity, for all its divisions, has always carried its gods not only in walls of stone, but in footsteps across sand. Close your eyes. Imagine those voices together. Chanting, singing, whispering. The languages differ, the prayers differ, but the longing is the same. The longing for guidance, for peace, for connection to something greater than the self. That longing was the true faith of the Silk Road, binding empires as surely as any treaty, carried not in armies, but in breath. The Silk Road carried silks that dazzled kings, gems that gleamed in torchlight, spices that perfumed entire cities. But there was another kind of treasure that slipped quietly into the world, more humble, more intimate, yet just as powerful. Food. For when traders met, they did not only exchange bolts of cloth or jars of oil. They shared meals. They broke bread together, sipped steaming bowls of broth, passed fruit across the fire. And in these simple acts, new flavors were born, new recipes created, new traditions seeded. The meeting of foods was as much diplomacy as any treaty, as much wealth as any chest of jewels. Imagine a caravan stopping at an oasis after days in the desert. The air is cool at last, the camels kneel, the fires are lit. Merchants gather around, unpacking not only their wares but their provisions. A Persian trader pulls dried dates from a leather pouch. An Indian traveler unwraps spices wrapped in cloth, saffron and cardamom glimmering like jewels. A Chinese merchant brings out tea leaves, their fragrance rising as they steep in hot water. Slowly, the bowls and plates circle the fire, and strangers become companions in the sharing of food. Spices were among the most precious gifts of the Silk Road. Cinnamon from Ceylon, cloves from the Moluccas, pepper from India, nutmeg from islands whispered about like legends. These flavors traveled farther than any army, entering kitchens thousands of miles from their source. Imagine a European noble tasting pepper for the first time, its sharpness burning pleasantly on the tongue. Or a Chinese family sipping soup flavored with saffron, golden as sunlight in the bowl. These were not just meals, they were revelations, doors into new worlds of taste. Fruits too crossed the road. Apricots and peaches from China found new homes in Persian orchards. Grapes from the Mediterranean reached Central Asia, their vines curling in new soil. Pomegranates gleamed like rubies on the tables of India, while melons from Samarkand became legendary for their sweetness, praised by travelers for centuries. To bite into such fruit was to taste a land far away, to carry in your mouth the memory of another climate, another soil, another people. Grain traveled as well. Rice spread westward, wheat eastward. Noodles became dumplings, dumplings became pasta, pasta took root in Europe. A dish we think of as belonging to one culture often carries the fingerprints of many, blended along the Silk Road, shaped by countless hands. And drinks. Tea traveled from China into Central Asia, Persia, and beyond, becoming not only a beverage but a ritual, a diplomacy of warmth. Coffee, born in Ethiopia and Yemen, later flowed back along trade routes, reshaping mornings across the world. Wine traveled east, mead traveled west. Every sip was a shared moment of humanity, a silent recognition that thirst and taste unite us all. The meeting of foods also changed medicine. For every spice was both flavor and cure. Ginger soothed the stomach, cinnamon warmed the blood, cloves eased pain. Recipes were not only for feasts but for healing. A physician in Baghdad might prescribe herbs from India. A monk in China might use knowledge brought from Greece. The kitchen and the apothecary blurred together, united by the road. Close your eyes now. Picture one of those shared meals at a caravanserai courtyard. The fire glows, the bowls pass from hand to hand. You taste bread still warm from the coals, dipped in oil scented with herbs. You sip tea, its steam carrying the fragrance of distant hills. You bite into a date, its sweetness cutting through the dust of travel. Around you, voices laugh, songs are shared, silence settles gently between words. Food was never just survival on the Silk Road. It was diplomacy. It was memory. It was trust. To share a meal was to lower your guard, to say, "I will let your flavors enter my body, I will carry your land within me." And so, long after the silks frayed, long after the spices were consumed, the foods remained. Recipes rooted in distant lands, flavors woven into daily life, dishes that became ours though once they were theirs. Proof that the Silk Road still lives, every time we sit at a table, every time we taste something born far from where we are. For the meeting of foods is the meeting of humanity itself. Simple, nourishing, profound. The quiet diplomacy of the table, whispered across centuries, still alive in every bite. The Silk Road was not only deserts and mountains, not only caravans trudging through sand and snow. It was also cities. Shining jewels set like lanterns along the endless path. Places where the road's invisible threads tightened, where goods gathered, where ideas converged, where lives touched and mingled. To travel the Silk Road was to pass through these cities, each one unique, each one a world of its own, each one an echo that still lingers in memory. Imagine approaching Samarkand, the city of blue domes and golden mosaics, rising like a dream in the heart of Central Asia. Even from afar, its walls gleamed in sunlight, its minarets pierced the sky. Merchants whispered of its markets, its scholars, its gardens filled with fountains and orchards. To enter Samarkand was to step into a tapestry woven from 100 lands. Chinese silks fluttered beside Persian carpets. Indian spices perfumed the air alongside Arabian incense. Greek philosophers' works lay copied beside Arabic commentaries and Buddhist sutras. The city itself was a book of knowledge, its walls inscribed with stories of the world. Further west lay Bukhara, the city of learning. Its madrasas and libraries stood tall, filled with scholars debating under shaded courtyards. Here, caravans brought not only goods but questions. About the heavens, about medicine, about the mysteries of the soul. Bukhara's streets echoed with prayers from mosques, the laughter of merchants, the chants of students. Its bazaars bustled with fabrics, dyes, tools, and jewels, but it was its wisdom that made it luminous. To rest in Bukhara was to rest in a sanctuary of thought. And then Kasha, at the edge of China's deserts. A city of crossroads, where east met west in the clamor of its great market. Imagine the noise, the press of bodies, the flood of color. Silk dyed in crimson and gold, carpets heavy with pattern, pottery gleaming with turquoise glaze. The air thick with the smell of roasted meats, spiced teas, dried fruits, and smoke from countless fires. Here, one could hear a dozen languages in a single street, see faces from lands never imagined. Kasha was not only a market, it was the very heart of the road, a place where no one was a stranger and everyone was foreign, yet all belonged. Further east, Dunhuang. The desert city where art and faith mingled in caves carved into stone. Travelers stopped to rest, and monks invited them to paint their stories upon the walls. Over centuries, these caves became libraries of the road itself. Frescoes of camels, of merchants, of gods and demons, of heavens imagined by distant hands. To walk through Dunhuang was to walk through the very imagination of the Silk Road. And there were others. Merv, once vast and glittering, its ruins now silent beneath the dust. Aleppo, where caravans poured into markets that dazzled with light and sound. Constantinople, the city at the road's western edge, where east kissed west at golden gates. Each city was both destination and departure, each one shaped by the road, and in turn shaping it. In these cities, diplomacy was not written on scrolls alone, but lived in the streets. A merchant offering a stranger tea in Samarkand. A scholar translating a text in Bukhara. A guard watching over a caravan in Kasha. These small acts built empires as surely as kings and armies. Close your eyes now. Picture yourself standing in one of those bazaars. The sun filters through wooden slats above, painting the stalls in shifting light. Around you, voices rise and fall like music, bargaining, laughing, singing. The air is thick with scents, saffron, smoke, roasted almonds, leather, incense. Every corner offers something new, every step opens another world. The cities of the Silk Road were more than stops on a journey. They were living hearts, pulsing with energy, gathering and dispersing the lifeblood of the road. And though centuries have passed, though many walls have crumbled, their echoes remain. You can still hear them in the laughter of markets, still smell them in the spices of kitchens, still feel them in the mingling of cultures across the world. For the Silk Road cities were not only places, they were crossroads of humanity itself. Reminders that even in vastness, even in division, there are points where we meet, where we belong together, where the world becomes one courtyard filled with voices, fire, and stars. On the Silk Road, caravans carried bolts of silk, baskets of fruit, jars of oil, chests of jewels. But none of these could pass between people without another kind of cargo, words. And words themselves were fragile. One slip of the tongue, one misunderstood phrase, and a bargain could collapse, an alliance could sour, a friendship could vanish like smoke. That is why the true guardians of the Silk Road were not always the soldiers at its gates, nor the merchants who counted their profits. They were the translators. Men and women whose voices bridged the gulf between tongues. Who listened, who carried meaning across cultures like water across stone. Imagine a market square in Samarkand. A Chinese silk merchant lays out his gleaming bolts of fabric. A Persian trader points to them, eager, ready to bargain. Yet neither understands the other's words. Frustration brews, suspicion flickers. Then a translator steps forward. His voice is calm, his gestures measured. He speaks to one in Chinese, to the other in Persian, his tone carrying trust, his phrasing carrying fairness. Slowly, suspicion fades. Smiles return. A bargain is struck. Without him, there would be silence. With him, the Silk Road lives. These translators were not only speakers of tongues. They were interpreters of worlds. A phrase in one culture might be polite, yet in another, it could wound. A gift in one land might signify honor, yet in another, it could mean insult. The translator knew these hidden currents, guiding them gently, ensuring that meaning was not lost but deepened. They traveled with caravans, sat beside kings, whispered in the ears of envoys. Their presence was not grand, yet it was essential. Without their voices, treaties would have faltered, marriages between dynasties would have dissolved, trade would have collapsed into quarrel. And often, their role was more than practical. They became storytellers, carrying myths and legends across borders. Imagine a translator listening to a Greek traveler tell of Odysseus and his endless voyage. Later, he retells the tale in a Persian court, changing the names, softening the details, but carrying the heart of the story. In this way, myths became shared, retold, reshaped. The translator was a quiet author of global memory. They were also diplomats in disguise. For a king may have armies, but his message would never cross a desert without someone to carry it in words. The translator was his unseen envoy, his breath across distance. And in that role, they wielded power of their own. A pause here, a softened phrase there, a word chosen carefully. They could calm tempers, ignite curiosity, or prevent bloodshed. Many lived in shadows. Their names rarely recorded, their voices fading into time. Yet their influence was vast. The Arabic numerals we use today, the words of Greek philosophy preserved in Arabic manuscripts, the Buddhist sutras translated into Chinese, all passed through the hands and mouths of translators. Without them, much of the world's knowledge would have withered, locked in a single tongue. Close your eyes. Imagine being such a figure. Sitting between two men who do not understand each other, watching their faces tense, feeling the weight of their pride. You breathe in, you choose your words carefully, you let your voice fall soft and steady. And in that moment, the room changes. Their shoulders ease, their eyes soften. A bridge has been built where moments before there was only distance. The Silk Road was not only a road of goods. It was a road of meaning. And the translators were its invisible architects, weaving bridges with nothing but breath, ensuring that humanity could recognize itself in the stranger. Their power was silent, but it shaped the road more deeply than armies or merchants. For without their voices, there would have been no Silk Road at all. Only parallel worlds, passing each other in silence. The Silk Road was a lifeline that bound empires together. But like every thread, it could fray. And it often did. For the road was not built on stone alone, nor guarded by armies alone. It was built on trust. Invisible, fragile, fleeting. Imagine a caravan moving slowly across the desert. Camels heavy with silk, spices, porcelain, manuscripts. The merchants hopeful, the guards alert. Every step is risk. Every mile is a gamble. And beneath it all lies one question: who can be trusted? Trust on the Silk Road was currency greater than gold. A merchant trusted that his guide knew the way to the next oasis. A guide trusted that his caravan would pay him fairly. A translator trusted that his words would not be twisted against him. Even rulers, even kings, trusted that treaties signed in distant courts would still be honored when caravans passed through their gates. And yet, trust could vanish in an instant. There were storms. Sudden, merciless. Sand that blotted out the sky, snow that buried paths, floods that swept away bridges. A caravan could lose not only goods, but lives. And with loss came suspicion. A merchant might blame his guide for leading him astray, a guard for failing to protect, a fellow traveler for abandoning him in the storm. Trust broke easily under the weight of despair. There were betrayals. A guard who accepted bribes to look away when bandits struck. A translator who favored one side, shifting a word here, a tone there, until meaning bent toward deceit. A fellow merchant who promised fairness by day but slipped away at night with stolen goods. On the road, temptation was everywhere, and loyalty was thin. There were raids. Sudden flashes of violence in the night. Bandits pouring from ravines, tribes demanding tribute, soldiers turning protector into predator. Caravans that had traveled together for months could scatter in panic, each man saving himself. And when the dust settled, questions remained. Who had fought bravely? Who had fled? Who had betrayed? The fragile web of trust was torn. Even in cities, even in caravanserai, trust was uncertain. A host might serve a guest bread and water with one hand, while plotting to rob him with the other. A merchant might sell silk of high quality one day, and weave lies into his fabric the next. Even in laughter, suspicion lingered. And yet, without trust, the road could not exist. It was as necessary as water, as vital as food. Strangers had to believe one another, if only long enough to complete a journey. Merchants signed contracts they could not enforce, sealed bargains with handshakes and oaths, swore upon gods foreign and familiar alike. They gave what they could, a smile, a gift, a promise, and prayed it would be enough. Think of the stories whispered along the fires of the caravanserai. Tales of betrayal, yes, of caravans lost, of men deceived, of promises broken. But also tales of trust fulfilled. Of strangers who became companions, of guides who saved caravans through storms, of guards who fought to the last breath to protect their charge. For every story of deceit, there was one of loyalty. For every betrayal, a bond unbroken. Trust on the Silk Road was like the road itself. Fragile, shifting, often buried in sand. Yet always rebuilt, always walked again. Without it, no caravan would move, no city would thrive, no empire would profit. Close your eyes now. Imagine the fire burning low in the desert night. You sit among men and women you barely know, their faces lit in flickering light. You share bread, you drink water, you tell stories. You trust, because you must. And in that moment, in the quiet night beneath the stars, trust feels real. Fragile, but enough. The Silk Road teaches us this truth, that human connection is always delicate. That betrayal is easy, but trust is necessary. And though it can be broken in an instant, it is also rebuilt in an instant. With a word, with a gift, with a gesture. And without it, the road and the world falls silent. The Silk Road was full of dangers. Storms, betrayals, raids, suspicion. And yet, within that harshness, there were also moments of peace. Quiet, fragile, luminous. Moments where strangers became companions, where enemies broke bread together, where the air itself seemed to soften. Imagine a caravan that has survived a long march. Sandstorms have battered it, thirst has thinned its strength, and tempers have grown sharp. Then, at last, the walls of a caravanserai rise upon the horizon. The gates open, the animals are led in, and the courtyard fills with voices. And as night falls, the fire is lit. Merchants set aside their worries, guards unbuckle their swords, travelers unwrap provisions. A bowl of stew is passed, bread is torn and shared, water is poured into waiting hands. In the silence between words, peace settles over the courtyard like a blanket. Peace was often born in small gestures. A stranger offering another his seat by the fire. A villager guiding a lost caravan to a hidden well. A translator softening harsh words into something gentler, preventing anger from igniting. These were not recorded in chronicles, yet they shaped the road as surely as any treaty. Sometimes, peace came in ritual. In the Ottoman lands, rosewater poured into guests' hands before a meal, its fragrance declaring welcome. In India, sandalwood paste pressed upon a traveler's brow, its cooling touch declaring honor. In China, tea poured with both hands, the gesture itself speaking more clearly than language. Each act said, "Here, you are safe. Here, you are respected." There were also the great moments, when armies set aside swords to share air and breath. A ruler granting safe passage to a rival caravan, knowing that the wealth of trade was greater than the price of blood. Two tribes meeting at a border oasis, exchanging gifts of salt, horses, or cloth, sealing temporary peace with laughter beneath the stars. These truces were fragile, yes, but they were real, and they allowed the road to endure. But the sweetest peace of all was found in the ordinary. In the taste of a fruit shared, the sound of music rising in a courtyard, the murmur of prayers at dawn when all faiths turn to the sky in their own tongues, yet together. In those moments, the divisions of empire faded. And what remained was simply humanity. Close your eyes. Picture yourself at such a moment. You sit by a fire in the desert night, the stars above vast and endless. Beside you, a man speaks a language you do not know. Across from you, another wears clothes unlike any you have seen. Yet when bread is broken, when water is passed, you are the same. Travelers sharing warmth against the vastness of the dark. Peace on the Silk Road was never permanent. It was as fragile as smoke, as fleeting as fragrance. Yet it was enough. Enough to carry caravans across deserts, enough to bind strangers together, enough to remind humanity that beyond suspicion and conflict, there is also kindness. And perhaps that is why the Silk Road endured for centuries. Not because of wealth alone, not because of kings or armies, but because people, fragile, weary, hopeful, found ways to be gentle with one another. Found peace, if only for a night, if only for a meal, if only for a breath. These moments of peace were the Silk Road's truest wealth. Invisible, unmeasured, but stronger than gold. The Silk Road carried treasures. It carried silk, spices, gems, manuscripts, songs, and prayers. But alongside these gifts, it carried shadows. Unseen, silent, deadly. For every road that connects also spreads. And just as knowledge and faith flowed from one land to another, so too did sickness, plague, and death. Imagine a caravan entering a city after weeks on the road. The camels sway heavily, their loads stacked with bolts of silk and jars of oil. The merchants are weary but proud, their goods intact, their journeys survived. The market welcomes them, stalls open, children run to see the treasures, rulers send envoys to bargain. Yet in the midst of this celebration, another traveler has arrived with them, one that no one invited. A cough. A fever. A trembling of the hands. The sickness has come. Unseen in the goods, carried in the breath. The Silk Road was not only a highway of wealth, it was a highway of contagion. Smallpox, measles, leprosy. And later, the Black Death. They moved as quietly as whispers, passing from traveler to traveler, town to town, empire to empire. Smallpox was one of the first shadows. Carried from land to land, leaving scars on the faces of children, thinning the strength of armies. Yet even in its devastation, it led to strange exchanges. Knowledge of inoculation, the practice of protecting against smallpox by controlled exposure, traveled along the road as well. From China and India, the idea moved west, changing the way humanity fought disease. Thus, even plague carried with it lessons, bitter but enduring. But the most infamous shadow of all was the plague. The Black Death. Born perhaps in the steppes, carried by fleas and rats, it traveled with caravans and ships alike. By the mid-14th century, it had reached the edges of Europe, devastating cities, emptying villages, reshaping societies. The Silk Road was its silent courier. A road of connection that became, for a time, a road of death. Picture the fear. A caravan arrives in a town, its goods rich, its stories wondrous. Yet days later, people begin to sicken. The fever spreads, the cough worsens, the breath shortens. No one sees the link, yet the road has carried it. Just as surely as it carried silk. And yet, even in these shadows, there were exchanges of resilience. Medical knowledge spread as people struggled to understand what afflicted them. Spices thought to protect against illness were carried farther than before. Ideas of cleanliness, quarantine, prayer, and healing mixed across cultures. The same road that carried plague also carried the seeds of medicine. The fragility of life was never clearer than here. A merchant might cross mountains and deserts, survive bandits and storms, only to be felled by something unseen, a sickness carried in the breath of a companion. And yet, caravans kept moving. People kept walking. The Silk Road endured. For humanity has always known that the same road that carries risk also carries hope. Close your eyes. Imagine the silence of a city struck by plague. Streets once filled with merchants now empty, fires burned low, doors shut tight. Yet in the distance, a caravan approaches. Still it comes, still it carries. Because the road cannot be abandoned. Because connection, even with its dangers, is stronger than fear. The unseen shadows of the Silk Road remind us of a truth we know even now. That in our connectedness lies both vulnerability and strength. That the very networks that make us rich and wise can also make us fragile. And yet, humanity continues to walk those networks. Because to be connected, even at risk, is better than to be alone. Not all that traveled the Silk Road was real. Alongside the bolts of silk, the sacks of spice, the manuscripts of wisdom, there drifted something softer, stranger, yet just as enduring. Stories. Legends born in firelight, myths whispered in caravan courtyards, tales embroidered with each retelling until they shimmered brighter than any jewel. For the road was long, and nights were endless. A caravan paused at an oasis, the camels resting, the merchants eating quietly. When the fire burned low, when the stars hung vast and silent, the stories began. Stories to pass the time, stories to entertain, stories to explain the mysteries of the world. And slowly, these stories walked across deserts as surely as the caravans themselves. There were tales of dragons guarding mountains, creatures so vast their breath scorched the air. In the high passes, travelers said, you could hear their wings beating in the storms. Whether the dragons were real or not mattered less than the fear they inspired. For sometimes a storm is easier to endure if you can name it, give it form. Imagine that you are not only fighting wind and snow, but outlasting a beast older than time. There were tales of hidden kingdoms, places of endless wealth and perfect peace. Shambhala, the city of light hidden in the Himalayas. Lands where rivers ran with milk and honey, where gold lay in the dust of the streets. Merchants told these stories with longing in their voices, and perhaps with a little cunning. For a weary traveler, imagining a paradise just beyond the horizon, would find the strength to walk another mile. There were tales of miraculous travelers. Monks who walked barefoot for 1,000 miles, their bodies glowing with serenity. Saints whose prayers parted storms and stilled bandits. merchants who swore they had crossed deserts only to wake in cities without remembering the steps. Legends magnified them into heroes, larger than life, their names carried farther than their actual journeys. Stories of strange beasts also wandered the road. Lions with wings, elephants with more than one trunk, giant birds whose wings could blot out the sun. Many of these were real animals, glimpsed by strangers and magnified into myth. A rhinoceros became a unicorn. A crocodile became a dragon. A monkey became a demon with clever hands. The Silk Road stitched imagination to reality until the two could not be separated. There were superstitions and omens too. Some travelers tied charms to their camels to ward off evil. Some whispered that a certain constellation, if seen at dawn, foretold misfortune. Some believed that fire lit at a crossroad could keep away spirits who wandered in the night. And these beliefs themselves became part of the road, passing from one culture to another like invisible cargo. Legends also explained the very wealth of the road. Why was silk so fine? Because, some said, it was spun from the hair of celestial worms who lived only in heaven. Why were spices so powerful? Because they were drops of sunlight hardened into seed. Why were jewels so rare? Because they were the tears of gods, fallen into the earth when the world was young. And still, there were the darker myths. Stories of cursed lands, where travelers vanished and never returned. Wells guarded by spirits who demanded offerings before one could drink. Cities that glimmered at night in the desert, luring caravans with promises of safety, only to vanish at dawn, leaving nothing but sand. Such tales kept men cautious, made them respect the vastness of the world they walked. But perhaps the greatest myth of the Silk Road was the road itself. For even as it was real, it was also imagined. People spoke of it as though it were one continuous path, stretching without break from east to west. Yet in truth, it was 1,000 shifting trails, broken, changing, fragile. The legend of the road was greater than the road itself. And it was that legend that inspired people to walk it, to risk their lives for connection, to dream of reaching lands beyond their imagination. Close your eyes now. Picture yourself in a caravan at night. The fire burns low, the stars glitter like spilled jewels across the sky. Someone begins a story. His voice low, his gestures slow. You do not know if the story is true, and perhaps it does not matter. You listen, you dream, you feel the vastness of the world pressing close. And the story carries you, gently, softly, until you too become part of its journey. The legends and myths of the Silk Road were not distractions. They were fuel. They gave courage to the weary, imagination to the curious, hope to the desperate. And long after the caravans have ceased, long after the cities have fallen silent, the stories remain. Echoing still, whispering across time. For in the end, the Silk Road was not only a road of goods or ideas. It was a road of stories. And stories are the most enduring cargo humanity has ever carried. The Silk Road, though faded in maps, though quiet in its ancient caravanserai, though its towers lie in ruin and its markets echo only with memory, has never truly ended. Its spirit has not vanished. It breathes still, hidden in the very fabric of our lives. For the patterns laid down by that road, the movement of goods, the mingling of cultures, the exchange of wisdom, continue today, reshaped, renamed, yet unmistakable. Imagine the great highways and shipping lanes of our time. Cargo ships, stacked high with containers, cross the seas from Shanghai to Rotterdam. Airplanes carry goods from Dubai to New York in a single night. Freight trains stretch like silver serpents across Siberia, linking ports to markets. These are the caravans of today. The camels are gone, the deserts crossed in hours, but the rhythm is the same. A constant pulse of movement, a lifeline of exchange binding the world together. And just as silk and spice once carried power, today other goods take their place. Microchips and machinery, oil and grain, clothing and medicine. Invisible to us as we walk our daily streets, yet each object we touch is a traveler with its own story. The phone in your hand may hold parts from Korea, assembled in China, shipped across oceans, coded with software written in California, spoken through by voices from every corner of the globe. It is a Silk Road in miniature. But the echoes of that ancient road go deeper than commerce. They live in our cultures, our languages, our kitchens, our songs. Think of the food you eat. Rice that once traveled west, pasta that once came east, spices once worth their weight in gold now found in every kitchen cupboard. The Silk Road lingers in every sip of tea, in every sprinkle of cinnamon, in every dish that marries flavors from lands far apart. The echoes also sound in diplomacy. Nations today speak of new Silk Roads, corridors of influence stretching across continents. Just as emperors once sought to control caravan routes, modern powers seek to control pipelines, shipping lanes, digital cables. The names have changed, the tools have changed, but the essence remains. Whoever controls the flow of connection, controls the shape of the world. And yet, beyond politics, beyond profit, there are quieter echoes. A university in Europe studies manuscripts once copied in Samarkand. A musician in Africa plucks a stringed instrument whose ancestor once traveled with merchants from Persia. A child in Japan traces characters in a book, their shapes once carried westward as whispers of language. These are the living footprints of the road. Unseen, yet present in daily life. The Silk Road also reminds us of vulnerability. The same way it once carried plague, today our global networks carry illness, crises, disruptions. A virus in one city becomes a global shadow within weeks. A ship stuck in a canal halts the flow of goods to half the world. The old truth remains: connection brings both strength and fragility. Close your eyes. Think of a caravan moving across sand centuries ago, its camels swaying, its bells ringing in the stillness of night. Now picture a line of cargo ships gliding across the ocean, their lights glowing against the horizon. Different vessels, different ages, yet the same pulse. The same need to reach, to connect, to carry. The echoes of the Silk Road are not distant. They live in you. In the clothes you wear, the foods you taste, the tools you hold, the languages you speak, the beliefs you ponder, the stories you inherit. Every step you take in the modern world rests on unseen footsteps that came before, winding across deserts and mountains, binding humanity long before borders were drawn. And perhaps this is the greatest echo of all. The reminder that we have always been connected. That no culture is an island, no nation a fortress, no people untouched by others. The Silk Road whispers still in every marketplace, every classroom, every kitchen, every song. Invisible, but enduring. The Silk Road is often spoken of as history. A chapter long closed, a path swallowed by desert sands, a memory carved into broken walls and forgotten ruins. And yet, its legacy is not locked in the past. It lingers, whispering in the very patterns of how we live, how we think, how we connect. It is timeless, woven into humanity itself. The road teaches us first about adaptability. Caravans crossed lands that seemed impossible. Deserts with no shade, mountains with no mercy, steppes with no end. And yet, people adapted. They learned to trust the stars as guides, to follow rivers hidden beneath sand, to build shelters against winds, to carry life in jars of water and sacks of grain. They adapted their animals, their tools, their very bodies to survive. This adaptability is still with us. When we face storms of our own, economic, political, personal, we draw from the same quiet resilience. The Silk Road whispers, "Bend, but do not break." The road also teaches connection. Strangers who might once have seen each other as enemies became companions of the night, sharing bread, drinking water from the same well, singing songs beneath the same stars. Languages clashed and mingled, faiths debated and intertwined, ideas collided and gave birth to something new. The Silk Road reminds us that humanity thrives not in isolation, but in contact. That every invention, every belief, every song becomes richer when touched by others. Its legacy whispers, "We are stronger together than apart." The road reveals too the power of trust and risk. To step onto the Silk Road was to risk everything: wealth, health, even life. Bandits lurked, storms rose, sickness spread. And yet, people risked it all for the chance of something greater. For profit, yes, but also for discovery, for curiosity, for hope. Trust was fragile, often broken, but still it was given again and again. Without trust, no caravan would move, no city would thrive, no culture would flourish. And so the road teaches us, risk is the price of connection, and trust is its reward. The Silk Road's legacy also lies in imagination. For as much as it carried goods, it carried stories, of dragons in the mountains, of hidden cities in the desert, of lands where the air itself shimmered with magic. These stories, whether true or not, gave courage to the weary, wonder to the curious, and meaning to the lost. Even now, we tell ourselves stories of possibility, of technology that will change the world, of futures brighter than the present, of discoveries waiting just beyond the horizon. This, too, is the Silk Road living on. Reminding us, to walk forward, we must first imagine. And perhaps its most enduring lesson is humility. For the road shows us that no empire lasts forever. The Persians, the Romans, the Tang, the Mongols, all rose, all fell, their armies strong, their palaces bright. Yet what endured was not their power, but their connections. The Silk Road outlived the empires it served. It whispers gently across time. Strength fades, wealth crumbles, but the threads that bind us, the exchanges of knowledge, of kindness, of memory, endure. Close your eyes now. Picture the road stretching endlessly, its stones and sands worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Kings have walked here, and so have peasants. Monks with scrolls, merchants with silks, children with nothing but hope. All are equal in the dust of the road. All have left behind a trace. And you, too, are part of this legacy. Every word you speak, every kindness you offer, every idea you share is a step upon a road that has no end. The Silk Road's timeless legacy is not simply about the past. It is about the present, about us. It tells us that humanity has always been a web, a tapestry, a caravan of many voices. And that to survive, to grow, to rest, we must walk together. It is not the silks that matter, nor the spices, nor the jewels. It is the unseen narratives, the trust, the imagination, the adaptability, the connection. These are the treasures of the Silk Road, treasures we still carry, treasures we must never forget. For the road has ended in maps, but not in memory. It continues every time two strangers share words, every time a recipe travels across oceans, every time a story is retold in a new tongue. The Silk Road whispers still, reminding us that we are one caravan, always moving, always learning, always bound together beneath the endless sky. And now, dear listener, the journey draws to its quiet close. We have walked far tonight. Across deserts that glimmer like oceans of dust, across mountains sharp as teeth against the sky, through steppes wide and endless, through cities that shone like lanterns of the world. We have followed the caravans, listened to the translators, broken bread with strangers, and felt the road itself whisper its secrets. The Silk Road is no longer alive in the way it once was. The camel bells are silent, the caravanserai crumble, the markets echo only with wind. Yet its breath lingers. In the tea you sip, in the spice on your tongue, in the paper upon which stories are written, in the very connections that bind our world together. Think of the fires that once glowed along that endless road. Each one a small sun in the darkness. Merchants warming their hands, monks whispering prayers, guards watching the shadows, children laughing softly in the night. The flames rise, flicker, and die. Yet their smoke drifts upward, their warmth lingers in memory. Just as the Silk Road itself, fragile, fleeting, yet enduring in its legacy. Close your eyes, and picture it now. The desert is wide and silent. The stars stretch above, cold and endless, yet gentle in their light. A caravan has stopped for the night. The camels kneel, the loads are set aside, the fires burn low. Around them, people rest. Their voices fading into murmurs, then into silence. The night grows deep, and all is still. The Silk Road's greatest lesson is not wealth, nor conquest, nor even trade. It is connection. The invisible threads that bind strangers together, that turn fear into trust, hunger into sharing, distance into belonging. And that connection, though unseen, is timeless. It flows through us still, as soft and steady as breath. So let yourself rest, dear listener. Let your shoulders ease, let your breath grow slow. The caravan has stopped. The road will wait for you. You are safe here, within the circle of its fire, beneath the watchful sky. And as the last embers glow, as the stars will gently overhead, as the night deepens, the unseen narratives drift into silence, becoming dream, becoming memory, becoming rest. The road grows quiet. The fires fade. The world softens into sleep. And now, let the night carry you into calm, into peace, into dreams as vast and endless as the road itself.